Hello, and welcome to the New Jersey Bill on Menstrual Health and Endometriosis, partnering with the Endo Foundation of America. I am Diana Falzone. I am a journalist, an EndoFound ambassador, and more importantly, especially as this relates to what we are talking about today, I am a woman with endometriosis, which affects 1 in 10 individuals born with a uterus in the United States alone. I am joined today by esteemed guest, Assemblywoman Shanique Speight, Dr. Tracy Haas, who is here to explain the disease to you. But first, I want you to know exactly what the Endometriosis Foundation of America is. It was founded over 10 years ago by Dr. Tamar Sechkin, who is a renowned endometriosis specialist and surgeon and top chef, judge, and renowned author Padma Lakshmi. And the goal of the foundation has been not only to educate about what this disease is and how insidious it is and how it affects almost 200 million globally, and that's just a rough estimate, but to help change laws, to make history. The EndoFound has actually helped lobby laws to be passed in the state of New York, which is similar to the legislation that Assemblywoman Speight is working on. So without further ado, I would like to give you a brief intro on what exactly endometriosis is by Dr. Tracy Haas, who is our interim executive director of EndoFound and a family physician in Wyoming. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Diana, and Assemblywoman Speight for bringing this bill forward. Endometriosis, as Diana mentioned, is a disease that affects over 200 million women in the United States. It's characterized by the lining of the uterus being located in a location outside of the uterus. So by definition, this is an outside of the uterus disease. That tissue that normally is on the inside of the uterus can be located on bowel, bladder, ureters, diaphragm. It can be inside the thoracic cavity. It can really be just about anywhere in the body outside of the uterus, and it bleeds monthly with the period. So where a normal status would be that uterus is going to slough off tissue and bleed monthly, endometriosis, you're going to have inflammation, bleeding, and activation monthly in places that are outside of the uterus. So women really suffer with pain and digestive issues and just a whole variety of issues when they have this lining tissue in a place outside of the uterus. This can be something that happens with the very first period. Occasionally, it can be even before periods start. So we have women who are, and young girls who start to have these cyclical symptoms. And the average time of diagnosis is 7 to 10 years. So we see this kind of cyclical pain and debilitating nausea and gastrointestinal issues happening cyclically for years and years before a woman is even diagnosed. Sometimes they're only diagnosed after it's been found that they're infertile. And so this is one of the leading causes of infertility in the world, but in the United States as well. And so the importance of diagnosing endometriosis earlier and earlier is so very important. We don't want girls to be missing out on life, missing out on the sports and educational opportunities that their peers are able to participate in. When a girl has endometriosis, they tend to be missing school. They tend to sit out on sports. If you can imagine, you're in a doubled over pain monthly, and girls will often have to make really tough choices. This often leads to some equity differences as well in reaching their career potential. So I'll end it there. If there's further questions, I can pipe in later.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Speight, this is something that you've become incredibly passionate about, and that is why you have created these bills in order to not only raise awareness about endometriosis in the school systems and offer these educational materials, as well as period poverty, overall about menstrual health disorders and education. What initially brought you to wanting to back a bill like this and create one?
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you so much, Doctor. Well, first of all, last year, we've been doing a lot of work when it comes to maternal health. And we wanted to kind of like get to the root cause of why some women become infertile and, while they're planning their pregnancies. And so our office, and my team, we started having discussions about menstrual health and menstrual disorders. And come to find out, one of my staff actually have endometriosis. And then we just started digging a little bit deeper into that discussion. And then, and knowing that young women suffer from these disorders, and growing up into a woman and not knowing and not being diagnosed until maybe later on in life, and maybe probably family planning, and not able to have a child because they have endometriosis, and getting to run around from doctor to doctor, or missing school, not being able to participate in sports. So this is where this idea came from. Our office, our team, and just someone being connected to me and my staff, suffering from disorders, and just telling me about her long life stories of how she had to deal with this, and just wanted to make sure that women in our state would understand that having a heavy period flow, or having heavy menstrual cramps, is not just a normal thing. You probably may have endometriosis, and oftentimes growing up, we accept it as this being our norm. And just want to make sure that women are educated, and knowing that maybe I have to go to the doctor to get a screening to know that this could be something else, not just a regular period. So that's what it's done.
Assemblywoman, with the contents of the bill, uh, what would be the proposal that you're looking to have passed for the state of New Jersey?
So the Department of Health would have to establish a program within the Department of Health to have a screening for endometriosis. That would be more so the gist of it. We still working on certain parts of the bill, but it would definitely have to go through the Department of Health, so that they will be able to set up how the screening process will take place in our maternal, not maternal facilities, but in our hospitals and doctors' offices, and how this can be diagnosed or screened.
What is your call to action for your colleagues watching today, for the viewers, for the citizens of New Jersey, the residents of New Jersey? What is your ask of them? What can they do to help you get this bill enacted?
One of the things that they can do is actually reach out to other legislators in my district, and continue to send emails, and also educate and inform legislators about this condition, because a lot of people actually don't know about endometriosis. They think that it's just a normal thing, and it's not really anything that women should have to worry about or deal with, but not knowing that this is a lot of stress on women. Women lose, are out of work, infertile, actually have other diseases that endometriosis may cause. But one of the things that I would love if people can reach out to my colleagues, to let them know this is a really important topic and a really important matter, endometriosis, and to just rally support around this issue.
And thank you so much for the work that you're doing as someone who has the disease, and also Dr. Haas also has it as well. To see the future generations have more hope of better treatment options, earlier intervention, potential cure down the line, hopefully sooner than later. It's promising. And I do want to explain from personal experience, and maybe Dr. Haas, if you're comfortable sharing, just to give an idea of what endometriosis can take away from someone's life, daily life, how debilitating it is. It isn't just a painful period. I, for myself, was diagnosed with infertility in tandem with endometriosis, which was shocking to me at only 32. I was just about to turn 33. And that was definitely not something I even thought was plausible or possible, that I could be infertile at such a young age. But endometriosis is one of the leading causes, as Dr. Haas said, of infertility. And no matter what your choice is, to have children, to not have children, to have that choice taken away by a disease is not something that anybody would want. Additionally, for me, I have undergone several surgeries, excision surgeries, which are considered the gold standard of treatment at this time. That gets down to the root and requires it requires a lot of money because insurance doesn't necessarily always cover this. So it's almost like you have to be part of the upper middle class and beyond to be able to even afford these surgeries. So there's much work to do in terms of even just the treatment, it's not always available. It's not always accessible. For myself, I had no idea that endometriosis was beyond pelvic or reproductive. I did not know that endometriosis could go all the way to the diaphragm. I did not realize that endometriosis could cause bladder issues. I had no idea when I was about 2 weeks away from kidney failure that endometriosis could cause that because it could cause the ureters to swell from scar tissue caused by endometriosis. And that to me was incredibly troubling to think that you could lose kidneys, and women and people with endometriosis have lost kidneys. It's just not acceptable in this day and age that anyone should have to suffer with this disease and not have access to the healthcare or the education that's necessary. Dr. Haas, are you willing to share a little bit about what you have undergone in terms of your journey with endo?
Definitely. And that was a good segue because my endometriosis actually manifested completely outside of the reproductive system. So from my first period forward, I had bowel issues this is the kind of thing we don't talk about even in the medical space. So I had gone to medical school and learned that endometriosis was about painful periods. Well, that is true. However, it's not painful because it's just cramps or bad cramps, right? I ended up having 3 bowel obstructions over the course of several years, requiring emergency surgery. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I went in for an appendicitis, or what we all thought, including myself, thought was an appendicitis, and it was actually a bowel obstruction from endo. 3 years later, I had another bowel obstruction, and each time I've had large pieces of, small and large bowel removed. So this is a life-threatening condition. My final surgery that I had with Dr. Seshkin 3 years ago, I had scar tissue wrapped around both ureters. I had it completely entwined around my sciatic nerve on the left side, and I also had it on liver, diaphragm, throughout the bowel. And this is the kind of thing that, even the medical community doesn't realize how much it can spread. I've been treated for the previous 15 years for it. And I'm going to air quote treated because it was the standard of care at that time to take a medication that puts you into an artificial menopause, basically a drug-induced menopause. And even during that time, it continued to spread. So we need to educate the medical community. That's part of my passion. Educate the medical community to identify it earlier, but also just planting that idea of, could this be endo earlier? Because I actually had my first surgery at age 17, my final surgery at 45. So that really shouldn't be the standard of care for anyone. And I look at all the missed time and just life-threatening things that happened to me all the way throughout this journey. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to absolutely anyone. So I want to get that word out. We need to be identifying this, diagnosing it, and treating it much, much earlier so women don't suffer like this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haas. And the other part that we mentioned too is about the delay in diagnosis. That's 7 to 12 years on average. And the stories I have heard where people have shared with me, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 20. And in between that time, there's all of that suffering. There's lost school, there's lost work, lost wages. There's so many things that are lost personal life, family time, but also so many misdiagnoses that happen in between that, where people are getting treatment for diseases they don't actually have because physicians might not necessarily think about endometriosis or even be necessarily knowledgeable. So it is very important that we arm our children, we arm the next generation with the know-how to know their bodies, to understand the signs and symptoms, that if something doesn't feel right, to not have it chalked up to, oh, this is just what you deal with the menstrual cycle. This is just a period. Suck it up. No, we're not going to have that. We're going to use knowledge as power. And that's why this bill that Assemblywoman Speight is putting forward to all of you that are watching today is so important and needs your support to move forward. And for those that are within the endo community and are joining us, there's a call to action. You can sign a petition. If you are a New Jersey resident, I encourage you to please call your local lawmaker. and say that you support this bill, because the only way we're going to make any real headway is change. And change only happens when we use our voice. And if you think your one voice doesn't make a difference, I will tell you it does. All of us here are using our one voice, and collectively it's a chorus. So be part of our chorus for change.
There was one piece I was considering adding, and I wanted your thoughts. And this speaks really to the equity issue that I feel really passionate about. It has been common in the past for endometriosis to be symptoms that are very classic for endometriosis to be labeled as being caused by a sexually transmitted infection, an STD, or pelvic inflammatory disease, when in fact the woman may have never been diagnosed with an infection, and endometriosis has nothing to do with STDs or infection. And so I really caution the medical space and anybody labeling women with this kind of debilitating pain that's cyclical, not to label this as infection. This really stigmatizes women and causes a lot of shame in a disease that already is plagued with shame.
Thank you for highlighting that. There's a lot of layers to endometriosis, and unfortunately a lot of societal, like you said, stigmas that are incorrect assumptions. So it is because of the education component that Assemblywoman Speight is trying to add that will be immensely helpful, and it without a doubt will help many, many young people that might have this disease, as well as people who are just struggling with other similar menstrual disorders. It's important to understand their bodies. Thank you both to Assemblywoman Speight. Thank you, Dr. Tracy Haas, for all you have done throughout the years for the endometriosis community, and for your continued commitment to this. And Assemblywoman Speight, you could have put your voice and your power behind any cause. And on behalf of the Endometriosis Foundation of America, we are incredibly grateful for the work you are doing.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today. We do hope that you'll rally behind and sign our call to action.